What's good, everybody? So, had fun tying a big streamer last week. Want to tie another big streamer this week. We are going for the Bling-Bling Sardine. Grab your stuff. Let's tie some bugs. Alright, in the vise today, we've got the Ahrex SA254 size 1, as well as the Spawn Super Bead, which is distributed by Hareline. This is the color raw again, in black, nickel. Any of those colors will be great. And if you've watched me tie it all in the last, I don't know how many years, I get on a kick. I'll run through 500 different variations of the same thing and end up with something cool at the end. So I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. So in our last video, we tied an anchovy. Now we're switching to the Bling-Bling Sardine, so it's going to have a lot of the same feel, use a lot of the same hook bead combos, all that good stuff. So if you already have the stuff to tie last week's fly, you're ready for this week's fly, mostly. So let's get some weighted wire. And this is 0.025, 6-7 wraps, whatever makes you happy. Cut off that front piece. Got the dedicated curved cheap scissor just for cutting wire. So that's what I'm going to utilize. By all means, you do you. If you like twisting it, spinning it, and breaking it off, great. Do that. Alright, so let's just get some structure here to hold that bead in place. So I'm just making sure that's pushed into the back side of that cavity. And let's get some thread started. So got some 6/0 uni. 140 Veevus would absolutely crush it. And the same with some Semperfli if that's what you want to use. And for the silly sharp scissor here today, I've got the Flysmith scissor. Brian Smith, you guys probably know this guy, ties flies on Instagram. Amazing scissor. Just want to toss that out there real quick. So let's solidify these weighted wire wraps with some angled wraps on our thread here for a couple passes, working those 45s, and now I'll come straight on with my wraps and bring all that in between each wrap of weighted wire, and thus preventing anything from moving. And I'm going to make myself a little cheat spot here so I know where to end when I tie in the first element, which will be a tail, and specifically bucktail. So I told you it's going to look very familiar. It's going to look a lot like that anchovy we did, but it's going to have some different stuff going on here as we progress. And this is one of those flies that if you're chasing a species that eats baitfish, it's going to eat this fly. And so coho, some albacore, whatever it might be that you're chasing out there, by all means, this is a great fly, very versatile, and feed it to whatever you think would eat a sardine. The chances are, anything that eats baitfish, again, it's going to be pretty easy and go, ooh, that looks like food. So roughly 1 hook length here for that tail. And again, I'm not stacking any of these hairs. I'm just going in. I do want to give myself the right angle to start. Then I can just lay that down. I'm not going a ton of pressure because I don't want that to splay all the way out. Just moderate pressure to start, and then we'll add pressure as we go for the next few passes. Trim out these butts so that they end roughly at the back side of that weighted wire, and just continue tying down, keeping it clean. Any of those little hairs that are in the way right now will shortly be a non-issue. One more pass, just really want to solidify that underbody and keep that all nice and even as we begin. So there we go. Let's get a loop started here. So I'm just going to make a thread loop and come back. I'm going to go around that thread loop 3 times and then bring that up, tie it down, and now I have closed said loop. Alright, so now to fill this loop, of course I'm going to have some of the ever useful, ever productive spawn dub going in here, but I've also got some micro lateral scale. This is the 1/69th inch lateral scale opal, and so what I've done is I've created my ladder of spawn dub. I've cut a bunch of that lateral scale, laid it on top, and then come across the top of that with just a hint more dub. So I've made sort of a lateral scale sandwich that's going to go into this loop and hopefully play nice. And as far as a measurement on this ladder of material, if you will, I'm looking at roughly 4 inches. And I'm just basing that off of a size 1 254, all that good stuff, tied a bunch of them. It also happens to coincide with the length of the scissor, so that's how I'm measuring my ladder of material before I start each fly. And guess what? They all come out the same. Who'd have thunk it? Alright, spinning this up. So here you can see already the difference is going to be a much brighter, much flashier finished fly, and 100% that is what we are trying to accomplish. So I'm just going to brush off any of those loose fibers, couple more spins, and we are ready to wrap. So you see that thing is just chock full of flash, and that's exactly what we want. And now just start working that up. Make sure you're coaxing all those fibers back with each touch. So before you wrap, touch, make it go back. So you can see what this flash is going to do. It's not just about a little bit brighter and more reflection and refraction, but it's also going to change that body a little bit. So it's going to have more oomph, more profile. It's not going to collapse as easily, and that's great because for the most part these sardines are going to be slightly larger than that anchovy we tied last time and all that. And so by all means, we do want a slightly bigger profile in this sardine. Alright, left ourselves plenty of room up front here because we are going to have a bunch of elements to play with. Tie that off and remove this little bit of loop. I don't know if you guys could see that, but that was a cute little cut right there. Courtesy of a sharp scissor, it helps. Alright, so now we're back to the Swiss CDC stainless brush here. Just really work through all those fibers, release them. If they're trapped, release them. If they're loose, take them out. That's what we're doing. So work your way around that entire thing, really get those fibers released. So now I do have some water on the table here on the desk. Let me go ahead and just get that slightly wetted. And you see here, none of these fibers, same length, great. That's exactly what we want. So now at this point, there's one piece of flash that's a little long. There we go. Now I can work with that. Alright, so now at this point, it just becomes a game of layering. And so if you look at the coloration in a sardine and pretty much any of these saltwater baitfish, there's so much going on, right? It's not just one solid color here or there. It's a gradient and all these different colors that are actually involved. So bear with me. This is, of course, my interpretation or opinion of the colors involved in a sardine. Where you are, they might be slightly different. The way you see might be slightly different. Tie what you see. Tie what you think the fish will eat. They'll let you know. So let's start with some light pink bucktail. And all this bucktail today is from Hareline. Amazing quality, amazing bucktails. Can't be beat. So again, not stacking any of these fibers. I want the taper at the end of those hairs all to, just be slightly off, if you will, so that it's a more natural finish fly. And so I'm just going to clean out the butts here, get any of that underfluff out, any crazy weird fibers out, and then I'm going to come in on the top here. And so you can see where the tail fibers are ending, and I want this to come right on top of that essentially. And so get yourself where you're happy and go ahead and tie that in. Keeping in mind we want all this to stay on the top. We don't want it creeping down the sides. Alright, we're just changing the dorsal look at this point. Make sure that pink is where I want it. I'm going to split it around the hook point and trim out those butts. So as we go, I'll try to keep in mind that that's a little bit weird, and I'll try to keep it coming down the whole time. So trim these out. And tie down those butts. So our next element is we're getting into some ice wing. And remember, the name of this is Bling-Bling Sardine. So we're going to have a lot of flash coming in on the dorsal side as well as what we put into the body. So I've got some Lavender Ice Wing, and so this is just going to make this really fine lateral edge of this pink and purple. And if you look closely at a sardine, you'll see this weird purple midline, and that's what we're trying to get at here. So I'm just going to turn this, yep, right on top, and that's what we need. And really solidify that down. And we are going to be putting eyes in the front here, so don't worry about it getting a little bit messy. We can clean that up as we go. And then I'm going to come in here like this angle, and I'm just going to kind of start where these pink bucktail fibers end, and then slowly move my scissor back as I finish that cut. And so I'm going to cut essentially into three different spots. So cut, 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 if you will. I know that's tough to see, might not make a whole lot of sense. And then just split that around the hook point like we did with the bucktail. And this will be our MO for finishing this fly, although we do have quite a few more elements to put in. So by the end of this, you will absolutely see a sardine come to life. There we go. All right, so let's get right into the next one. And so now we're going to switch to some fluorescent blue bucktail, and same idea. What you do want to do before you start a fly like this is just go through your bucktails real quickly. Make sure you have good bucktail, because as this fly goes, and you know, if you're tying it in bigger sizes, of course, you're going to need some really good bucktail fibers. Not all bucktails have really long fibers, so make sure that's something you check before you get started. No point being frustrated because, oh, my bucktail's short. You could always tie a shorter version of this fly and go ahead and smack fish like you know what you're doing. That's great. Alright, tying in some of this fluorescent blue now. Same thing, right on top, keeping it on top. And bodkin out, split that around our hook point like so. So again, very colorful fly, a lot going on, so bear with me here. And now let's trim out those butts. Pick them all up, get that scissor in there, easy peasy. And you can even come in, make a secondary little trims, make that as cute as you want right there in the head. Finish tying those down. Got a little silly there with that thread. I don't want to do that. Alright, so I'm just going to get my fingers moist again and try to keep up with this madness. Just add a little bit of something to control some of that fiber. There we go. So now, sticking with the theme here, now we are going Steelie blue on the Ice Wing. Let me just grab some here. I have got a proper mess going on this desk. Pretty entertaining, I think. I like making a mess. Alright, veiling that around the thread, and we'll bring that right on top. I've got a bunch of flash on there, but that's okay. You know, at some point, yes, a fly with less flash is great. Sometimes more is great. Today, more is better. So enjoy it while we do that. There we go. Same thing with this, with that cut I was talking about. I don't want even cut, so I'm going to stage that cut, kind of just make it match as I trim down. It's the equivalent of cutting hair with just an open blade that you don't actually cut. So bring that up, make sure it goes over that hook point evenly, get some on each side. And then we'll get wet fingers. Sometimes Ice Wing, you know, the more it touches a tool, the weirder it gets, so just keep that in mind. And slick some of that back. And then you can get a better idea too of these odd fibers at the end that you just don't need. Alright, we're almost done here, folks. So now I'm going into some Kelly green or forest green. Whatever green you have is probably going to work. I would say if you're in chartreuse, don't use chartreuse yellow, just go chartreuse green. Outside of that, any green should be fine. So I'll toss in a little bit of this. So you see that progression went from pink to purple, purple to blue, blue to green. And again, if you see these sardines a little bit differently, or if in your area they don't have as much blue or green or whatever, just slightly adjust and you're going to be dialed in for those sardines. Kind of cool. Oh, thread break. So you know what we got to do. Just gotta trim that off in a good spot and rethread. And at this point, by all means, you could undo that stack of bucktail and restart and then put it back on. But I think if you notice, like, it's not undoing itself, it's not spreading around, it's not jumping off there, it's just hanging out. A lot of tension in there, a lot of that material holds where the thread is trying to cut. I'm having a terrible time threading this thing, but we'll get it. There we go. So I'm just going to come in, catch where it broke, make sure I get a good start, and trim that one out. So here's where it broke. Now we can trim that side out as well. Ta-da! Nothing to it. It's not the end of the world. It's not even the end of the fly. It's just a slight pause. And there's where I talked about that ice wing fiber gets a little grabby. Just keep that in mind. Alright, solidify again, and now we can trim out those butts. So you see we are eating up a lot of space here in the front, and that is great, because this will all get covered up with resin before the end of it, so don't stress on any of that. Alright, we've got now Peacock green ice wing fiber coming in, and this will be our last flash, but not the last element. So again, veil a little bit of this over right on top. You can see this fly is considerably bigger than that anchovy we tied last time, and that is a good thing. So coming in on top and tie down to make sure it stays on top. So really solidify there. And go ahead and do some tidying, if you will, at the same time. And now still on that back side, I'm going to give that a trim. Make sure everything is stacking up. I know it looks goofy in the vise. Once we take this out and get it wet, it will all be fine. Peacock-eyed stick. This is going to be our last element. This will finish or finalize that dorsal effect for sure. Number of fibers is up to you. I'm not looking for a ton of them. We've got the majority of that flash and everything already incorporated. I am looking for the flow or the curvature of these to be somewhat natural when I start, and that looks pretty good. Once it's wet, all that'll train or become tamed and flow in the proper direction, so keep that in mind. Alright, trim out those butts. I'm going to get my fingers wet. See that little short guy? That bugs me, but not enough to trim it out. It's all going to be fine. Now let's wet it down. You can see how dark that dorsal gets, and that's what we're looking for. So at this point, just going to clean up a little bit of this messy work here in the front of that head, and we're ready for some wood finishing. So take your time on big whip finishes like this. Don't be afraid to add a couple extra. So there's like 6 turns. I just broke that thread again, but that's okay, because we're coming in now for the eyes. So I got one solid whip finish, come in with super glue for the eyes, and then this whole thing will be covered in resin. No weakness. Alright, got a couple eyes here. For the eyes today, same as the anchovy. These are rainbow black spawn eyes, 6 mil. Alright, a little drop of some super glue gel here on both sides. And that green bucktail seems to come down just a touch more than I was looking for, but I think we'll be okay. So I got the eye on my side. Let's get the eye on your side. That's pretty sardine looking to me. I don't know about you guys. There we go. line those eyes up. Once they are lined up, go ahead and give a little bit of pressure from both sides just to get them in position and holding, and then we'll let those dry. I'm going to get this fly somewhat wet right now and pop it back in the vise, but I'm going to do all that resin and everything off camera, and then when you see the finished photo or thumbnail, you'll see the resin on the head. So here we go. Let's get this bad boy wet and give you a little bit better idea of what this fly is going to look like in the water. And again, what do you feed a sardine to? Well, what don't you feed a sardine to? If I'm a fish and I like eating other small bait fish, well, then to me this is going to be a snack or a meal. And there we go, sardine goodness. And you can see like where all the end of those fibers hit. That's why we don't want straight cuts. Otherwise this would not have a taper. It would just be a block of bait fish. I don't buy bait fish in squares or rectangles. I don't think you should either. It should look something like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and we will see all of you on the water.